Okay, so if you're just joining, today we're going to be going over a series of how to use the yoga triangle for various poses. I'm following a guide here, so you'll see me referencing the guide, and we're going to do just a simple breakdown of what the triangle is, how to use the triangle. We'll touch on the triangle's design, its key characteristics for utilization. Each pose that we do, I'll include if it's a yin or a yang pose, and also I'll make recommendations on user experience. Of course, all of this is unique to each individual's body, and it's important that you listen to your body as you move through your practice. So today we're going to start with, supported firelog pose, jumping right into a fairly deep hip opener. So if you haven't adequately warmed your body up, I would definitely stop and consider doing some proper warm-ups and then come back to this. Supported firelog pose traditionally is a pose that's a deep hip opener, and it's usually considered a yin pose, although it can be used in a yang practice. So for supported firelog pose, you'll take one of your triangles, and I'll go over the characteristics of the triangle now. The landmark is across the bottom. There's a word here that says balance. You can use the landmark for knowing what direction to place the triangle on your mat or whatever surface you're practicing on. The point at the top is furthest away from the landmark, and the point is good for trigger points and specifically applied pressure. We have a long angle here. This is great for sliding under, and we have a shorter angle here for a different dimension of use. The flat side is also going to be a feature that you can use. When you take two triangles and you bring them together, you have a block. So we'll start by placing a triangle, landmark side down, between the ankle and the knee. And we'll take the other leg across the body, bringing the ankle to the other knee. You'll take your second triangle and you'll slide it in the triangle-shaped gap between the shin and the shin. And from here you can see the firelog pose supported variation. This is great for stabilizing the knee joints, and it helps open the hips. If this is challenging for you, you don't have to use the second triangle, although it is very good for stabilizing the hips. And a second feature that you can incorporate into this variation is bringing your hands to behind you and pressing your knees away. We want to make sure we do both sides. So uncross the legs. Give yourself a little reset. And switch sides. So you'll take your other leg, bring it underneath you, slide the triangle in underneath the leg, filling in that triangle-shaped gap. This is important for stabilizing the joints. Bring your other leg across your body, placing the ankle around the knee. Take your second triangle, slide it in, press the shin bones down, and option to lean back into your hands and press the legs away from you. Additionally, you can come into a forward fold here. Reset the legs. And we'll move on to another variation with the yoga triangle. This next variation is a wide-legged straddle forward fold, supported wide-legged straddle forward fold. This is a yin or a yang variation. You can use it both ways. Extending the legs into a straddle position and placing the triangles behind the knees. I like to place balance down with the longest ankle pointing toward my body. If you have any kind of tightness in the knees or hamstrings, this is going to be a fast favorite for releasing tight hamstrings, supporting tender knees, and opening the hips. In this variation, you have the option of coming into a forward fold or bringing your hands back to behind you to help tilt the tailbone forward and coming into a forward fold here. This is a very beginner-friendly variation. If you have tight hamstrings and your back pushes back, this pose will be pretty impactful for releasing the hamstrings. Over time, you can switch the triangles to just support underneath the thighs. You can turn them out in different angles to help roll the thighs in or roll the thighs out. This is one of the unique characteristics of the design of the triangle. Between variations, reset the legs. Moving on, moving into, let's do a supported Sphinx pose. So Sphinx pose is a yen pose variation. This is a heart opening pose. It's good for rolling the shoulders back and away from the body. If you sit a lot, if your head is forward and you feel like your shoulders collapse in or are rounded, this is an excellent variation for you. This is a prone position, so you'll be on your belly, and you want to bring the triangles together with the landmark balance face down. The B is pointing away from you toward the short angle, and the E is pointing towards you toward the long angle. So hypotenuse or landmark side down, triangles together. From here, you'll come into a position on your hips, and you'll slide the triangles to under your chest, extending the arms out in front of you, lifting the head and rolling the shoulders back. You can stay in this variation for an extended period of time. You'll feel the gentle compression of the lumbar spine here. This takes a lot of pressure off the low back, and it helps articulate the low back arch in a very gentle way. Other variations include extending the arms forward and resting the head, or extending the arms back and resting the head. From there, you definitely want to take your time as you come out of the pose. Do a reset, whatever that might be for you. And if you're wondering how this works, this is a myofascial release. So in terms of holding for an extended period of time, what you'll notice over time is this actually will help you increase your capabilities for back bending. Be sure to listen to your body while you're exploring these options. From there, we'll move on to another heart opening variation in yin yoga. This is a yin pose called heart bench. Similar placement here. We want the landmark face down and the triangles together. And then depending on the length of the individual's body, this pose can vary. If you have a long torso, you're going to find that your head will touch the floor with greater ease. If you have a shorter torso, this might need some adjustments. I like to say it's like the story of Goldilocks. You got to find which chair fits you best. So listening to your bodies. Heart bench is definitely a challenging pose. I wouldn't classify this as a beginner pose. I would definitely classify it as a more intermediate or advanced pose. So I sit and recline back. I want to make sure that I have contact with my glutes on the mat. And then I definitely want to support the head as I lean back. And you can see, okay, so honestly, that's a little low for me. I'm going to move it up just a smidge so that I can relax in this variation. For me, I like the triangles touching the shoulder bones. I can feel my shoulder bones making contact with the triangles, again, supporting the head and the neck on the way back. And that is much better. Arms can extend overhead, or hands can rest down on the ground. My dog is saying hi. What you'll notice is that this is a deep heart opening position, and it is definitely challenging, so take your time with this variation. You don't have to stay in for too long. Be sure to utilize your breath. Once you come out of the pose, some reset, some form of a reset. Move your hips, move your shoulders, move your belly. Amanda, can I reduce down to one triangle? Yeah. That's why you got a pair. So you can pull one away. I like to catch the head. If ever my neck is feeling really tight and I want to do heart bench, but my neck isn't releasing, you can reduce down to one. And this is right along the bones of the spine. The points of the triangle are soft enough to where this is actually quite comfortable for trigger point releases across the back of the spine. And my head is fully supported here. And I think I prefer this variation, at least today. Remember to breathe. This is also important to mention. The triangle can function as a tool that can help create correction in the posture and as a foam roller. So if at this point I was comfortable staying here, I could literally roll myself or move my body to release all of the fascia across the back of the body. So that's the utility in the bevel and the point. Moving along, since we're close to the floor anyway, I'm going to show you a really cool variation that I call the sideline shoulder support. So you're going to create a ramp with your triangles in this variation, taking the balance landmark and pointing it up and bringing the two triangles together, forming this ramp shape. Find your underarm and lay the underarm on the ramp. For sideline variations, someone that isn't comfortable laying on their back, this is a nice variation for releasing the head, neck, and shoulders. If you feel like you could wobble from front to back, you can kickstand the legs. You have all sorts of tissue under the arm that would benefit from releasing. You can hang out here for a while, and you'll notice that this opens up all of the tissue underneath the arm up into the shoulder, while keeping the neck in a relaxed position, which I think is important if you have any kind of tension or pain in the neck. You can also cue breathing into the side body here, and you can use the yoga triangle again as a foam roller or a biofeedback tool for the body. So expanding the ribs into the triangle. And then feeling the body release. Taking your time as you come out of this. If you're keen on seeing how it works, you can actually check your shoulders after this, and you'll notice that whatever side you did is lower than the other side. And this is just one of the ways that myofascial release occurs. I'll go ahead and switch sides here so you can see the back view. Again, laying the underarm into the ramp and kickstanding the legs to create support, or letting the head rest on the upper arm and breathing into the sides of the ribs. Taking your time as you come out of this and giving yourself a reset between sides. This could be extending the arms and turning from the wrist, the shoulder, or the elbow. Perhaps giving yourself a hug. And my back just adjusted, so that's wonderful. We'll move on to supported yogi squat. This is definitely a beginner variation, beginner-friendly variation of a yang pose that could be turned into a yin pose utilizing the yoga triangle. So traditional yoga squat, your heels might lift away from the floor. Same in downward facing dog, which is another really nice way to use the triangles. So coming into your yogi squat, if the heels lift, the space between the heels can be filled with the triangles. I like to go balance face up because I like to use this top angle to release the glutes. So I'm going to suggest balance face up just because I want the glute release today. But you can also do balance face down, and that's one of the cool things about the design of this shape. You have options. So I'll go balance face up, balls of the feet on the mat, heels on the triangle, and I'll lower. And in this variation, I can actually get into a good long spine here with more of a back bend shape in this yoga squat. And I can also connect my elbows to inside of my knees. My glutes are on the triangles, so I'm hitting those trigger points. This is pretty nice for releasing tight glutes. This can also be used for pressing down into the triangles, engaging the quads to come up, and same thing for lowering down. So you can use the triangles as a biofeedback device to create muscular engagement in places where you might struggle with feeling muscular engagement. Moving the triangles out from under the heels and doing a reset. I like a knee flutter. And lifting the heels and stretching the arches of the feet as well. Okay, these next two variations are definitely not beginner friendly. I'm kind of jumping all around on the guide list today, but I think you'll still find this to be helpful. So for a supported headstand, you can turn the triangles balance face down. And if you're not a headstander, this can be scaled to a more beginner-friendly variation. You can use a wall behind you if you need some support. If you have an open room practice, you can do this in the middle of a room, and you don't have to go into your headstand with this variation. You can just play with using the triangles as a biofeedback loop so that you can feel where your head should be touching. And if you're putting a lot of direct pressure into your neck, you can choose to alleviate or lift some of that pressure out of the neck with the triangles. So, coming into tabletop, extending the hips back and gripping. Really important that you grip the triangles with your fingertips. Touching the head, the top of the head, to the surface that you're practicing on, and feeling the back of the head touching the points of the triangles. From here, you have your grip, your shoulders are activated and pulled down away from you. You can curl your toes under and lift into this down dog shape. You can play with lifting one leg. You can play with lifting the other leg. And you can play with lifting both legs. I'm pressing down into my elbows. I'm keeping any unnecessary pressure off the top of my head, and I can feel my core stay engaged in this variation. When you're ready to come down, set your feet down, set your knees down, walk your knees back, roll your forehead to the mat, roll your forehead from side to side, releasing any pressure that you were holding in the neck. And then come back up. Roll the shoulders and gently roll the neck to release. Headstand is definitely not a beginner-friendly pose, so take your time with this variation. There's lots of ways to teach headstand, but I like this one because it gives me something that I can feel behind my head, which helps me feel more connection through my arms and allows me to take pressure out of my neck. Moving on to supported forearm stand. Okay, so this is definitely also not a beginner-friendly pose. Same guidelines here. You can do this with the wall behind you to create more stability for yourself. And the same things here as well, but we're gonna reduce down to one triangle. You can do two if you want. I like one. So I'm gonna reduce down to one triangle and balance face up for this variation. So using the right angle to help create a fulcrum to hold you in the balance on your way up. Grip the triangle, release down to your knees, press the elbows down, extend the hips. You can lift one foot up, you can lift the other foot up, and the same rules apply here. You can press into your elbows to find that balance point where you're staying off of your head. Your shoulders are engaged and pulling down away from your ears. Once you come out of this, again, take your time. Roll the shoulders, roll the neck, release the head. Last thing we'll go over today is a supported pigeon variation. Pigeon pose has a lot of different sizes and shapes. Pigeon pose for me is tricky because there's a lot of pressure on the knees. So I particularly like this variation because it allows me to align my hips in a yin or a yang version of pigeon pose without putting too much pressure on my knees. So preparing for pigeon pose, keep your triangles handy. It's probably a good point to talk about the ease of grabbing these. The triangles together weigh less than 3 pounds and they're smaller and they're easier to grab. So the idea is they should be easier for you to reach for when you're on your mat than a traditional yoga block. So if you come into pigeon from downward facing dog, you'll take one leg up into a 3-legged dog and you'll sweep your leg through. First thing is locate the triangle gap between the heel and the knee that's behind you and slide the triangle in there. Push your heel into the triangle to stabilize the triangle. This allows you to lift up and you'll find that naturally occurring back bend in pigeon pose and the psoas release that we all need. Second triangle slides underneath the triangle shaped gap on your back side between your glute and the floor. From here you can stay on your fingertips or you can release down to your elbows. The hips are squared off or even in this variation. And for an added bonus, if you like a deep myofascial release, you can lean off to the side and you can roll over the tissue across the top of the hip. For the royal pigeon variation with the foot bind, this gives you the opportunity to reach back while you can press down onto the triangles to get a hold of your foot. A lot of people find this to be challenging because they're flopping from side to side, but this variation makes it pretty accessible. Accessible isn't the right word. This is definitely an advanced variation, but it makes it a potential for you. This is a deep psoas release and a deep quad release. Take your time as you come out of this. Step back in a down dog, pedal your feet out. You'll feel the back of whatever leg was underneath you release and extend to the ground faster than your opposite leg. And we'll switch sides. Take the other leg up and through. Same thing first. We want to slide the triangle between the heel and the quad so I can push the triangle in there and lock it into place. And the other triangle slides under the glute. From here I can find that back bend. I can feel the hips square. I'm not dumping too much pressure into either of my knees. And I can come into forward fold. Again, I can use this to roll the fascia over the top of the hip, or I can explore binding here. Take your time as you come out of this variation. Explore down dog or any other reset you'd like to take. Take a couple of breaths. This is all I have planned to show you today. Thank you so much for tuning in, and if you'd like to learn more, reach out and we can discuss opportunities for learning.